I never expected her to notice. Not the missed lunch breaks. Not the way I stayed long after my tasks were done, just to avoid going home to a room that didn't feel like mine anymore. But she noticed. It was a Thursday, the kind that drags, when I looked up from my desk and found her watching me over the rim of her mug. She didn't look away when I caught her, just set the mug down and asked, "You always this quiet?" I shrugged. "Most days." She smiled like she'd already guessed that. The office was dim except for the strip of warm light spilling over her desk. Everyone else had gone. Printers asleep, hallway humming faintly. She'd kicked off her heels. I noticed that first, before I noticed anything else. "Want coffee?" she asked. I didn't drink much coffee at night, but I nodded, because the way she said it wasn't about caffeine. While she poured, I glanced at her hands, not long enough to be obvious, but enough to catch the faint scar across her knuckle. Wondered where that came from. "Here," she said, setting the mug beside my keyboard. "Milk and sugar?" "You remembered," I said. Her eyes softened. "Of course. It's strange how small moments like that can stick longer than whole conversations." That night, the office felt different. Warmer. Too warm. We didn't talk much. She reviewed something on her screen, pen tapping softly. I typed, deleted, typed again, aware of her movements in the corner of my eye. Every so often, our glances would meet in the reflection of the glass wall. I pretended not to notice. At one point, she asked about a report. I stood beside her desk, leaning slightly to see her monitor. The space between us felt too narrow for how still she stayed. "Your work's been good lately," she said. "Thanks." Her smile tilted, almost teasing, almost not. "You've changed since you started here." "How?" She didn't answer right away, just studied my face for a moment longer than she needed to. "You're more sure of yourself." Maybe she meant it as encouragement, but it sat in my chest heavier than that. I didn't know why. Around 9:15, she closed her laptop. "We're alone in the office," she said, as if stating a fact. I thought about saying something safe. "Yeah, everyone's gone. Or guess I should head out." Instead, I heard myself say, "Then let's stay late." She didn't laugh. She didn't move. Just looked at me, searching, like she was deciding something. Then she turned back to her desk, opened a drawer, and took out another stack of files. "All right," she said. The hours after that blurred. We talked about nothing. Movies, weather, how the vending machine coffee was somehow worse than the free stuff in the break room. But underneath it, there was this unspoken hum, like both of us were aware of a door we weren't opening yet. At 11:02, I caught myself staring at her hands again, the way her thumb brushed the edge of a paperclip before setting it down. She glanced up at the exact moment my eyes moved away. "Something on your mind?" she asked. "Not really." She studied me, quiet. Then she reached for her phone, tapped the screen, and slid it across the desk toward me. A text thread was open, my name at the top. The last message was from her. I hadn't received it before now. It read, "Still here?" I looked at the timestamp. Sent an hour ago, while I was sitting 10 feet away. Before I could ask, she said softly, "I wasn't sure if you'd answer." I didn't know why she'd texted me when I was right there. Maybe it was easier than speaking. Maybe she wanted to see if I'd ignore her. We worked another 20 minutes before she leaned back in her chair, stretching like someone who'd been holding her breath all day. "You ever notice," she said, "how it's quieter at night? Not just here. Everywhere. Like the world's too tired to pretend anymore." I thought about that. Guess I haven't. She gave a small laugh. "You will. When you're older." It shouldn't have stung, but it did, the reminder. 22 against 45. Two different calendars entirely. I asked if she always stayed this late. She said no. Used to. Back when home didn't feel like home. Then she sipped her tea like the answer hadn't cost her anything. Something in me wanted to ask more, but I didn't. I just noticed the way her hand wrapped around the mug, steady, like it had been through enough to know better than to shake. I told her I'd been meaning to move. She asked why. I said I didn't like going back to an empty apartment. She didn't say me to, but her eyes did. For a while, we just worked in that soft, clock-ticking silence. The kind that feels like it's holding something fragile in its hands. At one point, I dropped a folder and bent to pick it up. When I straightened, she was standing closer than I expected, holding another file out to me. Our fingers brushed. It wasn't even a second, but my chest went tight anyway. Thanks, I said. She nodded, almost like she hadn't meant to move toward me at all. We stayed like that, not touching, but not quite back to normal, until I packed my bag. She walked me to the elevator, holding her tea in one hand, my empty coffee mug in the other. When the doors opened, she said, "You did good work today." And then she smiled, small, almost nothing. But I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. She started coming in later. Not by much, 15 minutes, maybe 20. Enough that the quiet mornings we used to share turned into quick hellos and coffee in separate corners. I told myself it didn't matter, that I wasn't waiting for her. But I still noticed. One night, I stayed late without saying why. She passed my desk, paused, then kept walking toward her office. A few minutes later, she came back. "Thought you'd have gone home by now. Had a few things to finish." She didn't answer, just set a folder on my desk and stood there like she might say something else. Her hand stayed on the folder a second longer than it needed to. I looked up. She looked down. The sound of footsteps in the hallway broke whatever was in the air. We both stepped back. Her hand dropped to her side. The intern stuck his head in, said something about a missing form. She answered too quickly, her voice sharper than usual. When he left, the silence between us felt heavier. She shifted her weight. "You're good at what you do. You know that, right?" I almost asked what she meant, just work? But my throat closed around the words. Her eyes flicked to my mouth, then away so fast I almost thought I imagined it. We both moved at the same time, me standing, her stepping closer. For half a breath, we were too close. Then she cleared her throat. "Lock up when you're done." She walked away, and I was left standing there, the heat of her almost touch still in my chest. We left at the same time that night. It wasn't planned. The air outside was warmer than it should have been, the streetlights humming faintly. She walked beside me, not rushing. "Did you get the Henderson file done?" she asked. "Yeah. Put it on your desk." She nodded, but didn't say anything else. A block later, she stopped at a bench under a flickering light. "Let's sit for a minute." I hesitated, then sat. For a while, all I could hear was the traffic 2 streets over. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees. "Do you ever regret where you are?" she asked, still looking at the ground. "Sometimes." "What?" Her jaw tightened. "Because I do. More than I should. And I hate that I've." She cut herself off, shook her head like she could clear it. I waited, but she didn't finish. Instead, she glanced at me. "You don't know how many times I've almost." "No. Forget it." Her voice cracked on the last word. I wanted to ask what she meant. I wanted to reach out. But my hands stayed on my knees, knuckles tight. She stared at me, like waiting for something I couldn't give or wouldn't. And then, quietly, "If I asked, would you stay?" The next morning, her office door stayed closed. By lunch, I realized she hadn't been in the break room once. No coffee refill. No passing glance. On my desk, there was a sticky note in her handwriting. "Out for the rest of the week. Urgent matter." Nothing else. I told myself it was work, something personal, nothing to do with me. But when Friday came, I overheard someone say she'd been seen at the old courthouse, talking to a man in a suit. I didn't know she used to be married. I didn't know he was back in town. The week stretched into 2. Every day I came in earlier, left later, hoping she'd walk through the door. She didn't. One night, I stood outside her apartment building, hands in my pockets, staring up at the faint light in her window. The message was already typed. "Are you okay?" My thumb hovered over send. I deleted it. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. The rain had just stopped when I saw her sitting alone on the bench outside the office. I almost walked past. Almost. She looked up before I could decide. "You're still here?" "Yeah." My voice caught on the word. "Thought maybe you'd left for good." A pause. Long enough to hear the water dripping from the awning. "I almost did," she said. Her hands twisted in her lap, like she was holding something back. I sat down, not too close. "Why?" She didn't answer right away, just stared at the damp pavement. "Because I didn't want to need this." The air felt thinner. My chest felt tight. I could have said everything right then. How I'd missed her. How the silence felt heavier than any truth. Instead, I said. Then maybe we just don't name it. She glanced at me, the smallest smile tugging at her mouth. Maybe. Her hand brushed mine, light enough to deny, firm enough to remember. It's been months since that night on the bench. We still don't call it anything. We just show up. Sometimes it's 8:47 a.m., both of us reaching for the kettle at the same time, her with tea, me with black coffee. Sometimes it's staying late in the office, not working, just letting the hum of the lights fill the space. The bench outside is ours now. Even on cold days, she'll bring a thermos and I'll pretend my coffee hasn't gone lukewarm. It's not perfect. We have days when we don't talk much, and days when I wonder if she's already halfway somewhere else. But then she'll look at me over the rim of her mug and do that almost smile, the one from that rainy night, and I know. Today, as we're locking up, she hands me her scarf without asking. I take it without a word. Some things we just understand.